And good afternoon. It is Friday, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and time for us to rock and roll with another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. So we got a really good program plan for you today, and it's going to deal with a really big challenge that we're seeing coming up from the field, and one that halts a lot of companies in getting to where they're wanting to go. So, Cheryl, what would you say about today's episode before we get started?
Actually, it's on buy-ins. And the thing is, if you can't get your company to buy in, you're kind of hanging out there on the fence post by yourself. So there goes your team effort completely out of the water. So the first step in getting anything, I think, is getting a buy-in from the people that you're working with.
That's it. And that lady up in the upper right hand corner, I know she is loaded for bear and she's got more notes sitting in front of her right now because she did some research into this as I did. And we'll talk about that. So stick around with us. We'll be right back and we'll get today's show on the road. So here's our subject matter today. You know, every business needs to build what's called enthused customers. Enthused customers are the customers that brag about you, tell you about, tell others the great things that you do. They write the reviews, but there's a really key part in order to build these enthused customers. You know, we're all wanting great reviews out here, but to do that, we have to serve it with what I'm going to call today enthused team members. And enthused team members are team members that are bought into the mission of the company, what you do, the processes, and how you serve your customers to the best of your ability. So, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Brandy to start with. Brandy, what's your first thought whenever we talk about employee buy in?
Trust, and it has to start from the very beginning. So when you're getting employee buy-in, you're basically selling, right? Like we talk about our technician selling, you're selling to your team, you're selling to whoever you're trying to get to buy into whatever it is. And that can't happen if they don't trust you. And that can't happen if you don't start from day one. So from day one, we're selling them, hey, this is why you want to come to work here. And then during their onboarding, we're selling them on the vision, on the culture. So all of that has to be in place. I think a lot of times people think of buy-in as like one big change, and we will talk about that. I've had two in my company this year that I'm happy to discuss, but it's really ongoing.
Really ongoing. Cheryl, what would be your leading thoughts when we talk about employee buy-in from your perspective as a DISC assessor and being able to analyze the personalities of people as you do? How important is this and how do you get this buy-in?
Well, the thing about it, before you can ask anybody to do anything, they really you need to know how to ask them, number one. And that's, to me, that's how the DISC comes into play because from the communication aspect. Because I'm not going to get employee one to buy in with the same words that I would get employee two to buy in with because they have different personalities. And with knowing that, it makes it so much easier to do.
Gotcha. So, whenever I did my research, because believe it or not, we get an idea and we bounce it around, and each of us has a couple days to prepare for this particular broadcast that we do for that week with that subject matter. So, what I did was I reached out to some of the coaches and mentors that I depend on to assist me when I have challenges. And one of them was our friend Scott McCain. Scott McCain has authored a lot of books. One of them is called The Iconic. But Scott talks about how to build this exceptional customer experience. So Scott had two answers. So my first little part here, I'm going to read what Scott said. He said there's two primary aspects among many, but he ranked the number one as manager training. We know that employees aren't quitting companies. They're quitting managers. Employee buy-in equals employee engagement. But we don't have enough managers out there trained in why that's important and how to obtain it. Look, we come from an era where typical managers don't give a crap if you bought in or not. You did your job or you got fired and someone was ready to take your place. We know that doesn't work anymore in today's world, but there are way too many managers out there that who still are taking that approach with a workforce that can say, screw you and go someplace else. If you want better buy-in, we have to start first with who is doing the selling, and that's the managers. So what I think Scott has hit a key point here, which is leadership and how people, especially in mid-level managers, are leading their people. And as owners and as managers, we got to take a look at this leadership team that we put together. As an example, I was talking to a person this morning, having a call with them, and he shared where he had made some really hard decisions, and some people needed to move on and find a place where they would be happy. And it was all about bringing this culture into play and getting this buy-in. So, Cheryl, back to you. What's your next thoughts?
I have several things. I have a lot. I'm going to touch a few, then let Brandy have a do it. I think you have to lay out the vision in this world. People don't read your minds. They never did, and they never will. So you want to lay it out so that your employees can see it. And so especially your management. I agree totally with Scott. If you can't get the managers bought in, how are you going to get the ones under the managers to even think about it? And I think each person needs a personalized task, as the managers do. They have the task of managing. And then the employees need to know what their portion of the buy-in would be. And back to the thing you say all the time, when you see it going awry, you just need to nip it in the bud.
Okay, so that's that famous Barney Fife quote I use with a lot of people. Andy, you got to nip it. You just got to nip it in the bud. And
That's
that's
right.
very true. So, Brandy, down to you. What's your next thought that comes out about this factor and this important thing of your team members being bought in?
Well, I'm going to kind of piggyback on one thing that you said and one thing that Cheryl said. So Cheryl was talking about the managers and how they have to buy in and they have to be involved. Now, I don't want you to mistake that means that they have to agree with the decision. They don't have to agree with the decision. They just have to support it, and they have to act like they agree with it when they're giving the message and trying to get buy-in from those under them. Doesn't mean that they have to agree. So I just want to make that very clear, that agreeing and supporting are two very different things. And then, Jerry, you brought up about employee engagement. And so I had looked at a Gallup poll, and it talked about highly engaged employees have 9 different bottom line results. And I'm just going to read a few of them. 30% lower absenteeism, 28% less shrinkage. This one got me. 48% fewer safety accidents, 10% higher customer metrics, 22% higher profitability, and 21% higher productivity. So these are engaged employees that feel like they have a voice and feel like they're being heard.
Gotcha. So now I want to give you Scott, because Scott had a second part of this. So I'm going to read Scott's message. And so you'll know Scott would have been on this call today, but he had a prior commitment because he felt really strong. In fact, he actually robbed this subject matter and used it on his broadcast yesterday afternoon. So this was his next comment on this. Bigger vision. Tammy's dad, Tammy is his wife, was a lifetime factory worker. All he wanted was to go to work and come home. His retirement was taken care of by his pension. His taxes were taken out of his paycheck. And as long as he put in his 8 hours at the plant, he had 16 hours each workday and weekend to do whatever the hell he wanted until the world changed. And what they made in Indiana could be manufactured much cheaper in Mexico. Globalization only hit him at the end of his career. Today's workforce has been involved in this since day one. And Cheryl and I can certainly see this because we are in a textile town that all the factories were closed up some years ago. So this means if you want buy-in, you can't just say, here's the new way we're doing things. You have to show why it's happening, what will happen because of the change, and how things will be better for the employee as a result. People don't fear the change. They don't resist buying into change. What they resist is the unknown. Why would I buy into something if I don't know the result? Or even when you think about investing, you buy into a company because you believe the result is going to be advantageous. No one ever says, I'm buying stock in this company because I think they're going to go down the tubes. People don't want to buy into incremental tweaks. Give them a bigger vision of where the business is going and why they are an important part of that. Combat the feeling they can have of, if I just hunker down and keep doing the same thing, I can ride this out. Make them feel as if they're going to be missing something and something important if they don't buy in. And notice how this will go back to having better trained managers who can convey this story in a more compelling manner so it means something to the employees. Anyway, just my 2 cents, Scott McCain. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you what. To me, that was a whole lot more than 2 cents. That was remarkable wisdom, remarkable vision, because that's where it's at. If you listen to those words of Scott, you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about. And what I'm going to do is, after this is over, I'm going to put these comments into the comments on the broadcast so you can review these, because Scott has tremendous insight. And again, what's Scott's specialty about how to build an iconic business? So Cheryl, now back to you.
Okay. I think one problem that we as the employer, we are not, don't totally sometimes believe in our own ideas. I think first, before we can make someone else buy in, we have to be 100% on board. And that's what I see a lot of times. I see the managers or the owner dwindling about what they're saying. And when you're not confident, you don't pass it down. And you've just got to be fully engaged. And I don't think the owners are anymore. They bring the change up, they throw it out there. Here it is, take it, fix it, you do it. And it's not that way. We have to stand behind our word. We have to stand behind what we're doing with honesty and transparency, and showing the people and telling them why it's working, I think is the best thing. And then do the open door policy at that point. Actually, not only inviting them into your office, but invite them into smaller groups that can discuss the change amongst themselves. A lot of times they'll come up with some ideas you never dreamed about.
Gotcha. Dead on the money. So Brandy, what's your next thought in this discussion?
Well, I wanted to hit on several things. I just kind of nerd out on research. So back in 1990, Kahn had decided that there were 3 psychological conditions that have to be in place if you're going to get employee buy-in. The first one was psychological meaningfulness. And what he meant by this is there's got to be a personal awareness that there's going to be a return on that person's investment. So if I'm buying into what you're selling me, there needs to be a return. The second was psychological safety. So there's got to be a personal awareness that it's safe to bring one's whole self to work without negative consequences or self-image. So in other words, if I'm presenting this, whatever it may be that I want them to buy into, I need to leave the door open and let them have time to really tell me what their true feelings are and give them that time to just get out their concerns. And then the last one is psychological availability. And this is the knowledge that one has the necessary physical, emotional, psychological resources required in the performance of the role. And I really want to kind of step there on that one for a minute. So I'm going to read that again. The knowledge that one has the necessary physical, emotional, and psychological resources required in the performance of the role. I think we've all at one time or another had employees that were maybe going through a difficult time, or just probably really weren't right for the organization from the start, and they will drag the team down. And so it's really important to identify those people ahead of time. One of the things that said is employees often bring themselves into and out of an organizational life as their life circumstances change. And I think this is so true. I think back to when I had younger kids. I wanted a much different work schedule than I want now that I have teenagers. I think, if you have an employee that's going through a divorce and having a really hard emotional time, and that, they're probably not the manager that you want to be getting the other employees excited and ramped up, because they've got some personal stuff they've got to deal with. And then this was really important: as the number of current initiatives increases, individual increase begins to decrease. So, in other words, we don't want to come on and make 5, 6, 7 major changes all at once, because people are not going to buy in. We need to have one vision, present that vision to them, get the buy-in, and then move forward. So I told you I'd share my company. So we have had 2 big changes since the spring, summer. The first one is we changed our CRM, so our client relationship management system that all of our customers are in. We had been on the same one for 8 years. Quite frankly, we were all very comfortable on it, myself included. We loved it. And we decided that we were going to go a different route and choose a different CRM. And so that was really, we had to do a lot of thinking about everything that the employees might bring up, that their fears were, before we presented this and tried to get their buy-in. And then we had a list of everything, like, these are all the things that are going to get better. You're going to be able to remote deposit your checks. You're going to be able to send a video right there and then. So all the benefits, we just had to list out for them before we just came and said, guess what, guys? Today we're gonna switch to this program, and that's the end of the story, and not let them have that time to bring up any of their thoughts. The second one was for probably the last 19, 20 years, we have supported a certification in our industry, and now we are deciding to support a different certification. And so again, we had to think about, what are the benefits for employees? What are their concerns that they're probably going to bring up, before we went and had that conversation and said, hey, I know we've been doing this for the last 20 years, but now we're going to go here.
Okay. And so you ladies know, I hope you see who's on the screen right now, because a recent guest of ours has joined, and that's Mr. Al Levy. And he's made 2 statements. CRM is mission critical, and good job proactively dealing with the rollout. So there you go, Brandy. Mr. Levy says you're doing a great job. So again, like I said, we go, if you listen to the research that Brandy has done in preparation for today's call, and listen to what I'm telling you about going out and asking other people's opinion. And the next person I'm going to share with you is a gentleman who's also been a coach and mentor to Cheryl and myself, because we were involved in a group coach called the UPS. And we had 3 individuals in there that each had their individual expertise. There was Larry Wingett, there was Scott McCain, and another gentleman by the name of Randy Pennington. And Randy works with companies all on change. In fact, he has a book that I highly suggest you get. It's called Make Change Work. You can get it on Amazon. And see, I also want to bring this into play. And I actually put together a social post for our graphic artists to do today, that the number one reason that people fail is because they never sharpen their axe. And if you listen to what Scott said, you're going to hear that it's all about sharpening the axe so you can be much more efficient and effective as a manager. So what did Randy Pennington share with us, who is a master at change, and multi-million-dollar companies consult with him on change? He said, if you're going to make change, you've got to involve the workforce in the whys of what you're making change. And you've got to do that. He said there's 2 principles that you always want to remember. Number 1 is people support what they help create. They support what they help create. And number 2, no one ever argues with their own ideas. And when you look at that, this is one of the principles that we profess and we encourage every company to do, which is an annual SWOT meeting. Because in the SWOT meeting, we're bringing everybody together and we're talking about what are the strengths with the company, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, and we even started dealing in the last year, and we add in about the failures. But as Brandy and Cheryl both know, who participate in this process, sometimes on site, sometimes they are remote and connected in virtually, what we deal with is the weaknesses. and we get everybody in the company to buy into the weaknesses. Now, let me give you an example about how this buy-in works. In today's world, we're seeing a lot of companies that are offering recruitment bonuses. They're offering recruitment bonuses to new people. Now, from the companies that developed this from a SWOT meeting to where the whole workforce knew that they didn't have enough capacity. And Brandy, you've heard me say capacity many times, that you don't have the capacity to service your clientels. You know, we're always on a thing, as Alice professed, we're always on a fact to get more leads, but we're also to getting more technicians. And in today's world, we simply don't have enough capacity. The hiring is a menagerie. It's tough out there today because of the world that we live in. And hiring people is a very hard thing to do. It's a challenge. As Cheryl can tell you, she deals with this every single day from multiple companies of hiring these great people to come to work. But the SWOT process enables those companies to have their workforces working as a team. So from this, the companies that had SWOTs and they dealt with this, and as a united front, they decided to offer this, didn't have problems. But on the other side of the coin, other companies implemented recruitment bonuses without ever sharing the process with their existing workforce. And from that, what did they have? They had revolt. Okay. It's very simply, they had revolt. Why? Because the workforce was not bought in. It wasn't bought in. And it's vastly important. So again, as a manager, if you're listening to us today, and I saw Tommy Mello make this statement the other day, people don't have time to read. They don't have time to sharpen their axe. They don't have time to do the training they need to do. We hear this every single day. Well, we're just so busy. But the problem is they're trying to chop a tree with a really dull axe. And they're trying to do it with a chainsaw that ain't got no gas in it. That's the real world that's out there. So again, listen to what Scott said. It goes down to the management. Listen to what Randy has shared here. These are gold nuggets for you. So Cheryl, back to you. It's your turn. What's your next thought there?
I'm going to piggyback off Randy because that's where I was heading next, is the fact of you've got to have everybody's opinion into something. And if there's a loophole and someone still is not buying in, you need to bring them into the fold, let them help you make not a new decision, but is there a way we can revise this decision that you think might work? And it's kind of like at my job, they know not to come to me with a question without having an answer anymore. It may be the wrong answer, but I know they have purposely tried to find it. And I never look at them and I tell them, that's wrong. I'll always go back and say, let me tell you something, and you tell me how this sounds. And a lot of times they'll look at you and say, that is a better idea. You don't have to condemn somebody because they don't believe in what you're doing. You just have to show them why you're doing it, which is something like they're talking about. A lot of times we don't. We make the decision, we cut the board, it changes, and then you have rebuttal. You might have two or three people coming in with you. But on the other hand, the rest of them are going to turn and your company just goes away. Then they go in the corner and talk. This bunch is over here talking in the corner. No communication going on. Again, communication being the top 99% of all problems. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Buy-in is all about communication.
Gotcha. And Brandy, before I get you to go ahead, I want to thank those that are liking our broadcast right now. So our thanks go out to Kathy Ray, goes out to John Dean, goes out to Frank Matola, goes out to Lee Roth and Brent McDowell, who have all liked our program. You know, if you see value in this, one of the things that helps us to get our word out is sharing our broadcast. So please feel free to share this out to your friends, because that helps us get this word out to many more people. So Brandy, what's next on your list on that side?
Well, I wanted to bring up, so Jerry, you were talking about the hiring sign-on bonuses. I don't know if you're aware, but in 2018, United Airlines went through something similar. They had decided that instead of giving smaller bonuses to all their employees, they were going to give larger bonuses to just some key employees. And they actually had really good rationale and reasoning for it, but they never bothered to tell the other employees that. And so it just turned into a huge disaster and a revolt. That leads me into my next point of find a cheerleader. So I don't care if you only have 3 employees, one of those employees is the leader. There's always a leader. Find that leader, get them to be your cheerleader and buy into the vision, and it's going to make your job with everyone else a lot easier.
Okay. So you always feel like there's a leader, and let's put it a little bit closer. Would you say they're the ringleader? And sometimes we even have, even though we may not be a union shop, we got a union leader. That makes sense. And this person carries a lot. So we've got to get that person at the top there to buy into what we're doing. And you've got to be open to what people's thoughts are. You know, one of the things is if somebody comes up with an idea that you are feeling ludicrous, it is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Well, the thing that's going to put up a wall between you and that person is to say exactly that. That's the most ridiculous, redundant, stupid thing I've ever seen. There's no way we can do it. Brandy, when somebody says that to you, how do you feel when somebody says, Brandy, that's the stupidest idea, where'd you get to? Does that encourage you to have
very defeated? No, I feel very defeated. I feel like I was a balloon and they just sucked out all the air.
Correct. So what you got to do whenever you hear, no matter what the idea is, no matter how ludicrous it sounds, learn to say the following. You know, that's a really great idea. But let me ask you, how do we put that into play? Because what I did by saying that's a really great idea, Brandy, does that put a smile on your face?
It does.
It does. So what I'm doing is, and some people will even say, you know, I've got this thing that some people, I've heard it before. I don't want to talk to you because I know you will talk me into it. Okay. I mean, I've really faced that in my life with different groups. Don't talk to you. You'll talk us into doing what you want us to do. Well, that's because of the words that you use and properly selecting your words. But go back again. If you want a bought in workforce, you have to involve them in conceiving the change, because you've got to get people to understand this. And one of the things that Mr. Larry Wingett made Cheryl and myself do when we went through training with him and speaking was we had to develop a point of view. And Cheryl's got a much different point of view than I do of the way, but we base everything on this. And my point of view is that change is painful, but it's up to each of us to decide, do we want to go through the pain of change, or do we want to continue in the pain we're in? And as I look at Brandy, I know the challenge that she went through balancing a CRM change, balancing a software change, because you pretty well got to convince Brandy Biswell that something's going to work. Brandy is not a person that jumps in and says, hey, that sounds great, I go for it. And she's married to a guy that's even worse. They got to question everything.
It's hard to get our buy-in.
Yeah, getting their buy-in is a tough one, because that particular software, I recommended to them 5 years ago, and they don't want nothing to do with this, okay? Because it's too painful. And today it was a good decision because that software wasn't ready 5 years ago like it is today. But again, it gets down. If you cannot have this communication, this is a hard thing that each of us have to learn in business in today's world. You're not Adolf Hitler. You're not a dictator. You may own the business. You may own 100% of that business, but you better nurture that number one asset, which is your people. And I see companies that get tore to pieces because they don't have the respect from their workers and they refuse to listen any longer. People don't quit companies. People quit managers. That's a well-known quote that's been used. I don't even know who came up with it, but it's a well-known quote and it has tremendous value. So Cheryl, the ball's back to you.
Got it. Yeah, I'm piggybacking off Brandy's, and that's part of the next point. She had a huge undertaking with the CRM because it was a huge change. But even if the changes are small, and we know that it doesn't matter how small they are, if it's going to involve everyone in the company needs to have an idea of what's going down. And so a lot of times and Brandy goes farther than anybody I know of, probably, which I think super. But even if it's small, you need to interact with the people. Have to let them know what's coming down the pipe. I do mine when I change my handbook, and I know that might be pushing a little bit farther than most. But before I go in and change, I alert them that the handbook's being updated. We're adding this into it. Is there anything about this you don't understand? And to me, that makes it easier than doing it and then throwing it up amongst them, because most people don't like rules, number one. And so you've got to define it really clear, and you've got to tell them what it's going to take to do this. Like the CRM took weeks. It didn't take days. It took weeks. Other changes could be made in a day or two. But we have to all be on the same page. Actually, you want them actually one page in front of you. You want your ideas, then you want their ideas on top of it. Then you may revamp the change that you made or were going to make by the ideas they put in. We're not God, okay? Sometimes you feel like it or feel like you want to be, and it's this is my jungle and I'm Tarzan. But you could do that years ago. You just can't do that anymore. So we have to be very astute as to the people that work with us and their personalities.
So Cheryl, let me ask you a question about what you said. Okay, as we've told people before, all three of us are extremely high D personalities. That means we have a dominant personality. And all three of us have to continuously work to control that high D dominant personality. So how do you do that when deep down inside of your mind, Cheryl's the boss, Cheryl's the person? How do you control yourself? Because I think that's one of the problems is that people cannot hold and control themselves, and their passions, to be honest with you, overrun their ass. So how do you do that?
Oh, I've got to be very honest. There's days I want to grab them by the collar, bring them up close and personal, and explain to them what I'm thinking. But I don't, because I try to look at it from their view. And do you bite your lip a lot? You have to, because it's not in my nature not to say, because I'm the boss. It's just not in my nature not to say that. It's how especially you and I were raised. You had one that owned it, and it went down from there. But you just have to keep calm. Number one, I refuse to let anybody give me a heart attack because they're going to stress me out. And if I start the argument, then I have no recourse but to get stressed. So I don't argue, number one. And you take a deep breath, you think about what they're going to hear, you think about where they're going to go, and you try to gently get your point across. But it's hard I'm a 99. They don't get a whole lot worse than this. So I have to really be cautious. I do a lot of times because a D personality talks a lot faster than the other ones. And if I'm not very, very astute, my voice will pick up and it'll get very fast. And when I do, I have to, what's the old word, suck it up and go back to the person that I know I need to be, the leader that I need to be in front of this person.
Gotcha. So, Brandy, what's next on your list? I hope we can cover it because I know how in depth you get in these lists.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm writing notes because as Cheryl's talking and you're talking, more things come to mind. I kind of wanted to talk about Cheryl, said about a high D, and where that comes into play for me, I think is I also talk fast, but I also I just want to get to the point. I don't want to go through 5 reasons why. And so for me, it's really better to get buy-in from my frontline leaders and then let them present the change rather than coming from me, because coming from me, I'm just like, this is why we're doing it. It's great, yada, yada, let's move on. So it's really, that's where I have to know my own personality. One of the things I read is if a decision causes more work for employees initially, but reduces the workload over time, you will have succeeded in creating buy-in. And I think that's why our CRM change was successful, because yes, it was going to be a whole lot of work up front and it was going to be a lot to learn, but in the long run, it's made everybody's job much, much easier. Kind of going back to, Cheryl talking about that person complaining or whatever, you also have to look for that spoiled egg. So we talked about the cheerleader. You want to make sure that you're looked for the spoiled egg of the batch too, because there's usually one of those. So what I mean by that, if you're rolling out a new change, and it doesn't even have to be a new change, because remember, we're always getting buy-in, but you have somebody that's just always whining or complaining or trying to rile the other people up, you've got to get rid of them. They have to go, because that's going to hurt your buy-in every time. If you're not getting buy-in, I would suggest that you take 3 or 4 steps back and just really look at why, assess why. Is it a problem from the start when you're hiring them? Is it a problem with your culture? Is it a problem the way you're presenting it? Is it because your managers aren't buying into it, and so then your employees aren't going to buy into it? And really assess why you're not getting that buy-in.
Yeah. So I want you to think of this. Buy-in is sales. And just this week, Cheryl, myself, and Donovan, they actually presented, I didn't, presented a 6-hour sales class. And it was all about making sales. And it's all about the things that you have to do. So I want you to think about this for a minute. You're not going to walk into a customer's house, or they're not going to come into your office, your showroom, and you show them a product and you say, now give me your credit card because you're going to buy this. It doesn't work. Well, the same token here when you lead people. While we can look at it and we can think, hey, an all-powerful leader can command tremendous respect. An all-powerful leader can actually lose that respect. Because again, in the world today, you're not dealing like it was when we were younger. Brandy, I'm not sure at the age that you are versus myself and Cheryl, this is going to come true. But when we entered adulthood and you took a job and the boss said, jump, your answer was, how high? And today, if you ask someone to jump, they were going to ask the question, why am I jumping? Think about that. Because if you don't understand the people that you're trying to lead, if you don't communicate them in the right way, and most of all, if you cannot conquer the most important skill you will ever have, which is listening, you'll never get buy-in. So Cheryl, take your best shot. This is your last one. Brandy, you'll be next. So pick the best one out of that stack of questions you got there.
Well, first I want to piggyback off of the thing that we did. Selling to people, that is a buy-in. It's the same thing. It's one, you're selling a commodity, one, you're selling an idea. So actually you go at it from the same aspect. And I have found out this is what I think is most important. I think if you present it correctly, and then if you do have someone that's not buying in, if you talk to them long enough and in the way that they want to hear, they'll convince themselves that it's a good idea.
There you go.
That's the best I got.
Okay. So Brandy, you got to pick one off that long list. And
I know, gosh, that's so hard. All right. Well, I know we have a lot of business owners watching this, so I'll go with one of those. And it's an example that happened in my company this morning. Keep in mind that it doesn't always have to be you, the business owner, the one getting the buy-in from everybody. So we have always done hoodies in the winter for our guys. Well, I saw another company, it was like a plumbing company, and they had like Carhartt jackets. And I just thought it looked so much better. So we had brought up the idea to our employees, and most of them really liked it. This morning, one of my guys brought an example of what he doesn't want because it's too weighted. And it was really just kind of stressing my husband out. He's like, this is just too much. Forget it. So the idea is then we delegate that to one of our employees to take that. We don't have to be the ones deciding. There can be a leader that goes around to all the employees, says, these are 3 samples, pick which one you want. And then they just have to get it back to us to pay for it. It doesn't always have to be you.
Yep, that's it. So anyway, and one of the things we want to share with you, we're really proud of this, okay? This is a book that the 3 of us participated in, along with 12 other authors that we just released this book. In fact, this is Brandy's first time of being a published author. Let me go through the people that contributed. We got Brandy Biswell, Donovan Blanks, Bob Ferrari, Steve Hall, Carter Harkins, Taylor Hill, myself, Cheryl, Joshua Kelly, Scott McCain, Tommy Mello, Randy Pennington, Jillian Stewart, Ken Walls, and Bob Wise. And what this is a compilation of the number one thing that each of us would share with you in a conversation about how to be successful. And I'll be honest with you, this is the 14th book that Cheryl and I have wrote. I've done 6. She's done 6. I've done 8, total of 14 books that we have written over the last few years. So if you'd like some helpful information, go to Amazon and get that. But I also want to tell you, if you see me in person somewhere, hey, I probably have some in my briefcase. This is not about selling books. This is about sharing with you ideas and concepts that will go to the next level. Brandy, what would you tell people about this book and the value of what we've got in this success journal?
Well, you mentioned so many people that I admire and that are mentors for me. Number one. But number 2 is we at CVC have always said you cannot be an expert in every single topic. It just can't happen. And so what I love about this book is it's experts that have a strength in all different areas of running a business and employees and everything that comes with it in this book. So you're going to get to hear from all those different, as you call them, Jerry, subject matter experts,
Okay.
rather than just one voice.
Okay, so Cheryl, this is not your first trip around the rodeo. You have wrote books alone, and you have wrote collaborative books with other people over the years, as have I. And so what's your feeling about the value of what we got in this CVC Success Journal?
The value is, and actually it's the 7th one. That one makes 7 for myself.
Okay.
But I like the compilation books like that because when I'm doing a secular book by myself, it's my thoughts, my ideas, my timing, by what I'm doing. But to go back and read the others, what they have done, the other 2 compilation books I did were with Michelle Prince and a group of coaches. And it comes out so different. You feel like you've touched a lot of people. What I've got to say, mine's about hiring in there. What I've got to say about hiring, you might not be hiring, but the other 14 might say exactly what you need to hear. So to me, doing it this way, it's a remarkable feat. It's a remarkable feat getting 15 people to get it together. But when you do, it turns out great.
It does. And also, if she's listening, I want to issue a lot of big thanks to our editor. Her name is Sarah Shippey. She's up in New Hampshire. She's someone we have known for a number of years. And I'll be honest with you, if you need an editor, I would strongly recommend Sarah does a fantastic job, as Brandy and Cheryl will both attest, because this is the whole thing. We write our ideas down, and she's the one that puts them into the proper language, the proper punctuation where everything comes across right. She reads it word for word, and none of us are what you would call excellent writers that do not need editing. So this is a process. But also with this, I want you to think of something. If you would like to separate yourself in your business, if you want to become an authority in your market area, let me encourage you, think about authoring your own book. It is something that will separate you from the rest of the crowd, something unreal. One of our clients, a gentleman by the name of Steve Sobsack, just a regular chimney sweep up in Connecticut, put himself together and wrote a book and released it about 6 months ago. It was called Chimney Basics. And Brandy, I don't know if I hadn't shared this with you, but I told him, I said, he was on that committee that just met in Chicago. And I said, take that book with you. You need to give everybody one of those books there. And that's the whole thing. As you hand this to other people, it makes you a published author. It makes you somebody that can really separate yourself. Okay. Cody Whitwood added, you must find a way to have loyal, evangelical employees, and they will recruit your customers and submit your brand recognition. That's right, Cody, but it takes a lot of leadership to do it. And you got to hire the right seeds, and you've got to train them and take them through all the processes. So we want to thank you for joining us here on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. This is a free educational outreach that we do every week here. Comes to you from the CBC Success Group. It's also available to you as a podcast, and we can be found on many of the podcast channels. We're found, and you can actually, Randy, I don't know if you know this or not, you can actually go to your Alexis and say, Alexis, play the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And do you know that our podcast will come up on Amazon now through Alexa?
That's awesome.
It really is. So available through artificial intelligence. So tune us in next week. We'll have another exciting day. Kathy Ray, we appreciate it. Fantastic information. And we appreciate your friendship and your loyalty and your listenership here. I hope everything is wonderful today out there in Amarillo, Texas, with you and my friend, Colonel Jim. So talk to everybody later. This is the ending of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network for another edition. We'll hope to see you next week. Same time, same place. Be here with us. Talk to you later.